All right, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Today is Sunday, April 18th, 2021, and there's a fair amount of news to report, considering, it's a Sunday. There's a few things that have gone on around the world in the last couple of days, so let's jump right into it. So first off, Raul Castro just stepped down, hopefully I said his name right, ending the Castro reign in Cuba, if you want to call it that. Look, the whole the thing with the Cuban Missile Crisis and going back to the 60s and what have you, it really depends on your perspective on what went down with Cuba, whether you were alive or not, whether you learned to read the history and things like this. So I don't want to comment. It's quite complex, not so much controversial as it is complex, but yeah, I mean, look, Fidel Castro was in power for a very long time. I think the guy had something like 50 or 60 confirmed assassination attempts against him. He survived all of them. If I'm not mistaken, a cool little fun fact, I believe at the time the CIA worked with the Italian mafia, which was very powerful in the 60s and 70s, as most people know, to try to poison Castro by putting, I believe it was poison in his cigars, and it still didn't work. I have to say, folks, I want to use this word carefully, but the respect I have for the way in which Castro handled himself in terms of not allowing himself to get killed is interesting to me, because it's a very limited type of respect. But I guess we could say, I mean, look, do you know how hard it is to be able to avoid multiple dozens and dozens of assassination attempts? So I'm not trying to say that I agree with what Castro did in the past and things like that, but I mean, to be able to avoid that many assassination attempts, you got to give the guy a little bit of credit. You know what I mean? If we're taking a fully neutral stance and we're not letting our emotion get in the way of our politics, it's true. Right? So anyways, the next thing is that Biden is now considering extending, he ended up extending the refugee limit cap, if I'm not mistaken. Look, he got pressured to, and they knew that it would only look good for him with regards to the immigrants coming in. It would look good on behalf of the Democratic establishment, so he did it, right? The next thing is that the Israeli army released a video of its airstrike against Hamas in Gaza. This comes down to your politics and your perspective on Israel, what you think about Netanyahu's strategy about, Israel showing force, and in a lot of ways we could very strongly argue Netanyahu has crossed the line. But here's the thing, within the region of the Middle East geographically, here's the thing though, who's going to stop him? And I seriously mean that. It's not, I mean, we could argue, there's a little bit of imperialistic implications there, but who's going to stop him? I mean, he's backed by the U.S. We can also argue, Israel runs many aspects of the West in general, America and Canada, we could argue that, through their intelligence operations. But ultimately, it comes down to what you think should be done, because there's some people that say Netanyahu's got to go, he's a warmonger, this and that. There's other people that say he's got to stay because even though he might be a warmonger, he has no hesitancy to protect the Holy Land, which is, Israel, right? So again, it's a very heated thing. A lot of people have very controversial views, if you will, but hey, I'm just here to report it. As of them releasing the video, I mean, it's I don't want to say propaganda, but it's just to show, listen, we're hammering down Hamas in Gaza. So according to human rights, advisors and analysts, if you will, Israel shouldn't be doing it at all. But again, all these regulations for the UN and, all the European Union and all these fancy things, NATO, everything sounds nice until the real superpowers come in, which are generally, again, Russia, China, the UK, Israel, the US, generally that. So, it's funny how the rules are made and then all of a sudden they're broken, and it's just kind of like, whatever, because what are you going to say to Israel or the US? What are you going to say to them? And it's true. So anyways, the next thing is that a second case of a blood clot linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine was found in Canada. I'm going to leave that where it is. I'm just going to leave that right there. The next thing is that Alexei Navalny is allegedly dying from a hunger strike and could go into cardiac arrest any minute, according to some doctors there. Okay, here's the thing. There's some people that are saying, listen, what is he doing? He should just eat and, stop the hunger strike and just get himself better and just not basically run against Putin, if you will. But I guess we could say it's too late for him to be a free man, so to speak. Others will say, well, this looks bad on Putin because now it's making Navalny a martyr, basically. Here's the thing. Whether or not he's a martyr, it comes down to, can Putin control the protests? If there are protests that come from Navalny dying, or even right now him being on a hunger strike, Putin doesn't care. I'll say this again, and I say this in general to like the media and the journalists that write about this stuff. I know it's about the clicks and it's about the views and whatever, but he doesn't care as long as Putin can, as long as he can control the protests. What's the and he keeps the people in power happy at you know, the higher echelon levels of the Russian government. It's true. What are they gonna, like, what's gonna happen? And then it's terrible to say, but if you guys want the honest and brutal reality, so what? The way Putin will see it is, Navalny dies a martyr. Okay, I'm still in power. Big whoop. There might be some people that'll cry over his death, but okay, big deal. You just move on. It's true. It's the way it is. So again, I mean, look, I get what Navalny's doing. In a way, I can respect it and admire it. But at the same time, like I've been saying, folks, for weeks, what did you think when you got on that plane from Germany back to Russia? Come on, right? So the next thing is that having to do with Russia, I just want to continue on this. Folks, it turns out that the whole Russia putting bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan turns out to be false. You can check the articles. The mainstream media, they just slipped it in there. You can check BBC, Al Jazeera, New York Times. It turned out to be false. Not the Washington Post, because they won't admit when they fucked up. Pardon my English. The intelligence community walked it back, saying it was based on sketchy intelligence at best, which basically means they made it up. Basically. You mean the CIA lied? Oh, I didn't know the CIA lies. You know what I mean? So Jen Psaki, Biden's press secretary, was then asked about it, and she dodged like you wouldn't believe. Pardon my French here. What a fucking joke. What a joke. I'm upset at the fact that they pushed this story like a motherfucker just to push against Trump. And I'm not trying to go pro-Trump, but if we're being fully fair here, let's talk about massive media corporations railing against Trump. You remember that Axios interview with what was his name, with Jonathan Swan there, when he said, he goes, "Sir, it was in your written briefing," and Trump said no, it wasn't. It turns out Trump was right. I mean, look, Trump has been wrong about a lot of things, but this time around he was right. And this is one of the biggest stories that was pushed by the Biden campaign. Now, allegedly, the real reason for this was because Trump wanted to pull troops out very, very early and very, very quickly, right? And very efficiently. And people within the military-industrial complex basically made up and or leaked this story, basically speaking, right? In order to slow down the withdrawal of troops, to justify saying, hey, we got to keep the troops there because Russia's now putting bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads. You see what I'm saying here, folks? It was a bullshit story. The Washington Post had said they confirmed it. What was his name? I think it was John Hudson said he confirmed it. He didn't. And in his own article that he claimed where he confirmed it, he said at the end, if confirmed. So did you confirm it or not? And for those that are on the Patreon members only episode, the most recent episode, excuse me, when I talk about how these news anchors in the mainstream media, they'll say things like, oh, we just learned from the CIA. So you just learned from the CIA. I'm not saying to believe Putin or Russia, but I would be nearly just as damn skeptical, in my humble opinion, about whenever the CIA says something. So when the CIA says something, that's it. It's God. That's it. It's just done. Right? Because, the CIA doesn't own, 10, 20% of Facebook. The CIA doesn't have, infiltration and investments in massive media companies. Like, what a joke. What a joke. And then no one, and this is the problem. The tweet from John Hudson, who's a journalist, I say that with air quotes, on for the Washington Post, his original tweet has not been removed, but somehow James O'Keefe's tweet gets removed of that video of that CNN technical director, Charlie Chester. This only validates even further what Charlie Chester was saying. You just throw shit up. Like when Charlie Chester said, at CNN, we brought on a bunch of medical doctors and stuff to analyze Trump's behavior, if he had any medical issues, but they had nothing. They had nothing, folks. Charlie Chester admitted it on the date. He said we were just throwing things up to see if what stuck. How is that any different than what CNN accuses Fox News of doing? Do you see what I'm saying? So let's be fair and let's be consistent. This stuff pisses me off because I'm as most of you probably saw too, if you follow politics even lightly, this story was rampant for months, and it was bullshit. So this is what pisses me off when people say, well, I know my facts because I check the Washington Post, and then I check the New York Times, then I check, CNN, not really BBC. I'm not going to lie. They're a little more fair. actually. But then I check, MSNBC and NBC. Yeah, because when they're all fed the same goddamn story by the CIA, they're all going to run with it. So how is that validating anything? That's just like saying, you have 5 friends, you line them up against the wall. Hey, you. You ask them a random question, and the next one goes, yeah, because you told all 5 of them at the same time. It's the same idea. The CIA lined them all up and just fed them the story, and just pumped it. You see what I'm saying? Like, god damn it, man. This is what pisses me off. And then we get questioned for, making 1 or 2 posts, or we get, censored for making 1 or 2 posts about, concerns having to do with the COVID vaccine. But when Zuckerberg was caught in a private video conference questioning the efficacy and the safetiness of the vaccine, that's fine, right? This is it's right in our faces now. Anyways, the next thing is that there were 100 people injured after a train derailed in Egypt, which is very unfortunate. Next, Syria is holding presidential elections on May 26th. I'm curious to see what will happen here. I have not been following the politics of Syrian politics. What I do know is that it's still a very war-torn country. Look, it's stories like what I just mentioned that make me even question if if Assad gassed his own people, because allegedly he didn't. So again, and there's evidence to suggest that too. So, but the reason why this supposed to be unbiased nuclear gas chemical commission thing basically said that they had to lie because if they didn't lie, it would push, or it would look good on Russia. Like, they gotta stop with this Russia stuff, man. Like, and the reason why I say that, folks, is not because I'm not saying Russia's not an enemy, right? We got to be extremely vigilant of Russia, just like China, but they got to stop making this shit up. This is this is just going to ramp up, and this is probably what they want, but this seems like it's ramping up another mini version of a Cold War kind of tension. Like, come on, The next thing is that Lebanon faces tough Ramadan amid insane food prices. Yeah, I mean, it's true. The food prices the price of everything has gone up all over the world, I'd imagine, unless I'm totally missing something here. But yeah, it's unfortunate. The next thing is that the U.S. and China agreed to tackle the climate crisis with urgency. Okay, this is how you know it's a puppet show, not the climate part. The fact that, okay, they can go back and forth and argue viciously about one thing, and then the next thing it's like, yeah, no, we're just going to hold hands metaphorically on the climate thing. No problem. Like, I understand, the excuse is, well, we have to be civil. We can disagree here, but we have to. That doesn't mean we should close the door metaphorically for everything else, folks. If they're as passionate as they say when they go back and forth about the Muslim Uyghurs and COVID and this and that with China, or when China accuses the U.S. of false flags and things like this. I mean, who do you blame at this point? Who do you blame? It's a puppet. It's like when Kamala Harris gave a fist bump to Lindsey Graham, right, a few months ago, before when she was vice president elect, if I'm not mistaken, while they were viciously going at it on Twitter. It's a puppet show. It's a show. It's a two-party system to try to just make the heads keep clashing because the infighting is what keeps the control. It's simple. Right? Now, I'm not saying that about all the politicians. I want to make this very clear. But, because I do firmly believe there are some good ones on both sides, but you can probably count them on your hand how many there are. The next thing is that Saudi Arabia and Iranian officials held direct talks in Iraq, allegedly to try to make their relationship better. Yeah, because lately it's kind of been like a tit for tat kind of thing that's been going on. So, I mean, look, it's tough. Like, and I don't take joy in saying this, but the Middle East is a mess generally, and it's so unfortunate. And because again, I have a lot of friends that live in the Middle East right now, that were from the Middle East, and they tell me, they go, Dave, it's a mess. There are certain parts of the Middle East that are beautiful in terms of geographically and things like that. But I mean, come on, it's unfortunate to see so many bombs being dropped, so much war. And look, we can argue that's partly because of the West and many other things as well too. So I don't know. The next thing is that Pakistan cabinet shakeup sees 4th finance minister in 2 years. Okay. well, sure, that's interesting. But more importantly, the Pakistani government shut down social media for X amount of hours. I don't know exactly how long, over concerns of potential protests. You see that right there, folks? That's suppression, because they know that's how people like you and I gather to protest. Social media. Very simple. Now, I don't know if, an app like Telegram would be allowed in Pakistan, or if it's functioning there. But again, these are all tools that governments have real trouble suppressing in real time. So what do? Just shut down the whole thing. At that point, you might as well just not give them internet. Because again, this is exactly what these major government bodies fear. Now, I'm not saying the protests in Pakistan are good. I'm just using that as a general example of the way in which humans and people like you and I come together to say, look, we like this or we don't like this. It's simple, right? The next thing is that China's economy grew, well, okay, we have to be vigilant to these numbers, but 18.3% in a post-COVID comeback. I want to see where those numbers came from. I mean, it came from the BBC reported it, and even though they are mainstream media and what have you, they're not nearly as propagandistic, if that's a word, I think it is, as the Western media generally. I want to know where that number came from. If China said it, I don't believe it. I mean, again, we're at the point in time, folks, where people are waking up, not just in a spiritual sense, but in the sense of they're questioning everything. They're saying, okay, just because the New York Times wrote it, does that actually mean it happened? And then you look into it, and it turns out the things that we've been falling for years in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when we'd open a newspaper or magazine, it turns out it's the same idea. It's just at the time we did not know any better, right? So again, which is why independent news, I guess we could say, or reporting organizations are getting censored all over YouTube and things like that. The next thing is that the UK and the EU are having talks on Northern Ireland, and it's intensifying. It allegedly has to do with the UK breaching their deal with Northern Ireland regarding the sea border checks. Look, it's unfortunate to see, this whole thing with Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, and all that. Some people may disagree with me. I have a few friends that are Irish, few friends that are Scottish, a lot of friends that are British. It's unfortunate. The UK is a nice place. Again, this is just the typical, long-standing tension, if you will. And I mean, it's certainly not as bad as the tension between Israel and Palestine, that's for sure. I mean, at least with over here, the EU and the UK and Northern Ireland, they'll actually sit down to talk. Israel and Palestine, they won't even be in the same room at a UN assembly. I'm not even kidding. So again, let's see what comes of that. The next thing is that Facebook faces a massive legal action, a lawsuit over a data leak of 530 million users, including phone numbers, credit cards, emails, you name it. Now, Facebook made a statement saying that the data was scrapped and was never available to anyone in the public. We'll see what comes of that. Facebook is so bad for privacy. So freaking bad. I mean, it's again, the CIA owns like 10 or 20% of Facebook unofficially. So, I mean, come on, right? And the final thing, and this is quite ironic, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, a Democrat, has paid out $62,500 to settle a dispute with a male staffer who accused her of grabbing his penis and laughing at him, which is technically sexual assault. Hey, I mean, look, if it works both ways, it works both ways. I mean, it turns out that, clear when a settlement is made, one party's guilty. It's basically just, take the money, shut up. Simple, right? Like I say, it could happen with men too. That's why I always say, whenever, women accuse men, I always say when I try to give metaphorical examples, it could always happen the other way around as well, right? So, do I think that the guy was, traumatized that, an older female woman, regardless if she's a politician or not, grabbed his junk? No, I honestly, without looking into it, I would dare to say he did it to try to prove a point. Now, if he genuinely was traumatized by that, I don't know. With all due respect, I don't know how, even if you didn't want it, even if you, as a guy, I don't know how you can get traumatized by that. I mean, generally speaking, it's what guy wouldn't want a woman to come up and just grab their junk? But I don't know. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So anyways, that's it for today. And we will catch all of you later in the day. Cheers.